Yeah, so there we're live again this month with Talking Social Enterprise. The usual suspects in Marcus, Christoph, who's myself, and Jaco. By the way, if this is the first time that you're signing into Talking Social Enterprise, this is an initiative that the three of us, started around a coffee table. It was coffee, but we were inspired. So coffee can inspire too, I suppose. Asking the question what we can do to escalate the success rate of social enterprises, us all being involved in one way or the other in supporting social entrepreneurs and being social entrepreneurs ourselves. And we thought that with this medium of social media really taking off and things like Google Hangouts becoming more popular, that is a way for us to also contribute to making sure that the whole sector as social enterprise is growing, mainly through talking about it, and that's why we decided to call this Talking Social Enterprise. So today we'll be talking social enterprise again, like we do every month, and we invite a guest along. Today we've got Pat with us. His face may in fact look a bit more familiar than the other three guys on this show, because he is used to having cameras tuned into him. We'll talk a bit about that a bit later. And also about how he's been successful in raising a significant amount of money into his social enterprise. In fact, the amount of 32 million recently. So that is surely something that we all can learn from. I'm looking forward to learn from what Pat did in LifeCo UnLtd. In fact, there's a change in the name that happened recently too, which we're looking forward to hear about. If you've tuned into our show before, I see this Ilana, Paul, Tinashe. Welcome here. Those look like new names. If you tuned into the show before, we usually dealt with news and events and so on first, and then later got to the guest. We will turn it around this time around. So we're not going to neglect the news and events and opportunities that are out there. We'll cover them too, but we'll jump sooner into the topic of our discussion today. And like usual, Marcus would be leading us in that. So, shall we just proceed, Marcus? Maybe we keep it informal like we usually do. So by the way, we invited Pat, who is a TV man and appears on national TV still till recently on a regular basis. I suppose he's used to other guys organizing his sound, but he forgot his headset. So we're going to toggle around a bit there. With him trying to remember to mute when he's not speaking. Otherwise, we may have some feedback on the call. But yeah, so welcome to the space of social enterprise where we do everything ourselves and no one else is going to organize our sound for us. Marcus, may I, or let's just do this quickly, you know, sort of, Jaco, before we start off, if you can just kind of check in with us. What have you been up to lately in the social enterprise space yourself that's worth sharing and that is exciting for you?
Pretty busy with sorting out host organization for a group of Oslo interns coming to South Africa in June. Very exciting, both engaging with some fresh organizations that we haven't spoken to in a while, and figuring out where they need some help and where we can add. So that's been, I think, the most important thing that's been chatting to the guys in Kenya. I'm an ambassador. They run probably the best postgraduate program you can do in the impact space. It's a tremendously practical that they run for about a year. And
Jaco, I'm going to interrupt you quickly.
Yeah.
It seems that we have the typical bandwidth issue going on here. So may I suggest that perhaps you switch off your video so that we can hear you well?
That's better.
Happily. I'd much rather you guys hear me than see me.
It is now much better. So it sounded very interesting, because what I heard you is say you were talking about foreign students coming here to learn about social enterprise in South Africa, and that's quite an interesting proposition, I suppose. You know, sort of that people are coming to South Africa specifically to learn more about South Africa, about social enterprise from different kinds parts of the world.
Correct. I think the wonderful thing to come and learn about social entrepreneurship here is because it's not really institutionalized yet, and there's still a lot of activity around it, and as much as we like to present the idea that we know what, all of us are kind of still finding our way through it. So it's from countries where social entrepreneurship is normalized, but to still be able to come here and experience what it's like at the grassroots of it all. So we are still looking for host organizations. So interested in having interns, especially if you're a from you. They just need to work on a very specific project. For some info on our Facebook page.
Yeah,
They can check out.
Jaco, I'm gonna suggest that you hold those thoughts for later in the show, and that perhaps you see if you can perhaps restart your computer or switch off any background apps, because this is as nice as these tools are that we have available to ourselves nowadays. We are still hampered by the lack of proper highways of data flowing between ourselves, and this we're experiencing here now. So we kind of catch every fourth word of yours and get the thrust, but. Maybe we can hear properly if you can come back in the show when you maybe can improve your bandwidth. I know you're kind of a techie, so maybe you've got a secret there up your sleeve. So let's save these things, but it's really isn't that interesting, Marcus? You know, sort of. So to come to you, because I know you're also involved in these kind of things. You know, sort of our foreigners are coming here to see what we're doing.
Definitely. I mean, there's a lot of very exciting social enterprise activity happening in South Africa. It's not as formal as, let's say, the UK economy, but there's definitely huge amounts of activity. So, for example, I've been working quite actively in the last week or two with the International Labour Organization around procurement platforms for social enterprises, and have finally got the Western Cape government strategy rolling again. So this is the official government strategy in the Western Cape for social entrepreneurship. So generally this year's looking very positive so far. Things are moving incredibly quickly, particularly in the Western Cape where I'm based. And it's in fact a struggle to keep up with all the activity and the opportunities at the moment. So I wouldn't have thought I'd ever be trying to catch up to the industry, but it's happening. And okay.
Sorry, we've got a fan. We've got a fan that crashed our party here. But please keep going.
But Christoph, should we just start the interview perhaps, or?
Yes. I mean, yeah. So the interesting part is, you know, sort of I suppose, you know, sort of from businesses or organizations like Pat's, you know, sort of as examples of what it is that people are coming here to study, you know, sort of. So how is it possible to build a successful business? And if I understand it right, that Pat will be talking to us about failures and how we can use failures to build successful businesses too, you know, sort of. So it's not only about the quick solution of a 32 million raising of money, but over time that you build a success. So I'm pretty much keen to learn about what Pat found works and how they've built a business that others can learn from. So if I can hand over to you, Marcus, to lead us in the discussion. Thank you.
So anyway, it's, to start us, firstly, welcome to the show, and it's a real pleasure to have you here. And after all the years of watching you on E-News as the newsreader, little would have anticipated that you'd be joining our social enterprise show. And so we're going to be talking a bit later about how you managed to use 7 million rand to unlock 32 million rand investment and for your social enterprise. So that's something very few people have succeeded in. I don't think anyone I know of has succeeded in that. So we'd be really interested to hear how you did that. But let's perhaps start off with talking about your life that is not ETV, because most people think that that's your job. You're a newsreader, and recently when you've left the news after 10 years, you mentioned something about, oh, there's LifeCo UnLtd. So one of my colleagues said, oh, do you know Pat has left ETV? There's this thing called LifeCo UnLtd that he's working with now. And so perhaps tell us a bit about what is this thing called LifeCo UnLtd that would motivate you to sort of leave the celebrity lifestyle and start working full-time in a social enterprise.
Marcus, thanks, and to Jaco and Christo as well. Thanks for the opportunity. To get directly to your question, the LifeCo UnLtd, in a sentence, finds and invests in people to enhance their enterprise and life performance. That's it. How we do that is a little more complicated, but that's effectively why we exist. And the organization was first started when I was a newly qualified teacher, and I was 23 years old. So what's that, 27 or 28 years ago? It failed, and then restarted 17 years ago and did a little bit better. However, as many of us in this space know and understand, in order to pursue your passion in the social sector, you've still got to somehow find a way to, put food on the table and pay the light bill and then hope that you actually have power to your home, and then get by. And I did what I needed to over the years and found myself in broadcasting, and I ended up being able to sustain myself and the family while building LifeCo UnLtd, which was called Life College and then merged with Unlimited.
Okay. So, and Pat, and how big is LifeCo UnLtd at the moment? And I mean, how many people has it trained? And how many people has it trained? How many people have gone through its process? How many staff do you have? Perhaps you can give us some indication of magnitude.
It started very small, like many things, and many of us in this space, in a garage. And we first started working with 16 students very quietly, and it grew over time. It's now 17 years old. I'm speaking since the second start, 17 years old. And today we've reached 55,000 people in 8 of the 9 provinces. It's just the Northern Cape we'd love to get to, but we're not there yet. We have at the core 18 people employed full-time, and we have another 90 plus people who are licensed around the country to run our programs. So we're just over 100 people in total. Okay. We're a B2B, to be clear, a business-to-business social enterprise, and we sell our services to companies, institutions of learning. Most of them are schools and universities and other social enterprises or NGOs. And we have 60 plus of those who hire our services. Or we'd never get to the 55,000 if we tried to do all of them ourselves. Our replication model is key to us reaching these individuals. And then in terms of describing the size of the organization, I suppose it's also fair to speak about the structure of the group. There's a trust that governs the entire group. And the trust has one beneficiary, which is our NPO that does all of our development work. And the trust also is 100% owner of LifeCo UnLtd Investments, which is a private company that services corporate South Africa, but also holds investments. And we take small stakes in different companies. And all in all, we have an asset base of 110 million rand, in addition to the kind of turnovers that we do in our normal sales activity. We describe ourselves as trading for change and not necessarily enjoying begging for small change. No disrespect to NGOs who go out looking for funds.
Okay, sorry, Pat. And so you definitely, from what you've described, very clearly in the whole social enterprise box. And I'm curious about just 2 things. If you could perhaps firstly tell us about what a typical program looks like, how long it is, what type of topics are covered on it. And secondly, perhaps if you can think of an example of an entrepreneur that's been through one of your programs, and tell us a bit about how that, where they were and how that program has changed them, and to give us a better sense about what LifeCo UnLtd does.
Okay, I'm going to back up a little bit in my attempt to answer your question, Marcus, if you don't mind. The group merged the classic Life College offering, which really took programs into schools and universities and partnered with other NGOs. And it did that over much of the 17 years. Merging with Unlimited South Africa, which was started by 2 phenomenal women here in South Africa, Kathy Waters and Heather Brandon. It could be out by a year, but 5 or 6 years ago, that they brought the Unlimited UK model to South Africa and customized it for our circumstance. And then we did the classic find, fund, and support social entrepreneurs, largely in the Cape Town and surrounds area. And the two organizations came together and merged officially last year, which brought the Life College, classic Life College component of this merger together with the Unlimited component. And it meant very simply that as the youth emerged from schools and universities, we could now look at placing them and working with them as they entered the social space as entrepreneurs. Now, Life College just didn't have that. It would have taken us a long time to build it. We did a rough costing. It would have cost us 6 million rand just to build a post-institution entrepreneur and enterprise support program. What Unlimited brought, of course, was a solution that was already tested. So see us as a pipeline. Step one is the classic development work in the institution. Step two is find, fund, and support social entrepreneurs. And step three, which we're going to be innovating this year and hopefully implementing next year, is our social venture capital business. So we'll put capital in the hands of these entrepreneurs and their enterprises and even take a stake or do it on loan finance. So there's 3 parts to our pipeline, and that last part we're building this year. Can I go on to talk to you now about the programs that you asked about?
Yes, yeah, please.
So what Life College would do in schools is run a series of programs which we call the Champion Mentality Series for Youth. It's made up of 4 distinct programs. The first one has to do with discovering purpose and self, identity, purpose, who I am. It's vital to identifying the entrepreneurs, the leaders of the future, knowing who I am. The second one is Young Entrepreneurs Unlimited, where they get involved in actually taking capital, small bits of capital, and trying it out. Win, lose, or draw, you're in the program. And it's through failing that they often learn their greatest lessons. And they then move on to New Young Leaders, which is about leading self before leading others, because it's vital for entrepreneurship. And it completes with a program called Nelson Mandela, the Champion Within, which speaks to citizenship, a conscious and rooted program that takes the individual and connects them to society and citizenship. And it's in that 4-program series that we can offer 1-day programs, 3-day intensive programs, up to 16-week programs each. So we could be in a school for anything between 2 and 3 years, or if that principal wants, simply see them once a quarter for a year and put them through the program. But putting capital in their hands is a big part of the methodology. So those programs happen in the college, and then the Unlimited piece is staying with the entrepreneur to support them, put capital in their hands, and help them grow.
So, sorry, Pat, and if you just meet quickly. So we've got one of our guests, Peter Latachan, has a question just about, so a typical session, how long do these, the different training modules last? And, you know, on a typical entrepreneur's journey that you'd work with, if there is a typical entrepreneur out there.
There are 2 questions there. I'll deal with the first one. We've learned over the years that the purists, remember, I'm a teacher by profession, and I've remained a teacher. And what I and my colleagues wanted to do, and Carmen Derrito, who's a co-founder of the organization, is also a teacher. We really wanted to do in schools what we were trained to do initially, which is to provide comprehensive trainings and interventions every day of every week, all the way through for as many years as we could get. Now, many of us in this space, and you will know, that when you go in to supply a service as a social enterprise to the school, you battle not so much for, you know, having to find the money, you battle to find the space in the program to do this. And we quickly learned we needed to tailor-make our offerings into shorter workshops, which could last half a day, and offer 4 programs in the series. all the way through to something that will be 16 weeks each. And all in all, with 16 weeks, you're offering 64 weeks of training over 2 or 3 years. Principals and their staff invariably would start with a simple one first and try you out. When they see the results, they go for the next, and invariably you're well integrated and they're running longer programs. The same with the university. They're not going to make any space for you until they're convinced that program number 1 that lasts half a day works. The second part of your question in terms of the typical entrepreneur, and I know you say that tongue in cheek because there isn't a typical entrepreneur.
Yes.
Everyone is really unique in the way that they arrive on this earth and find meaning in the market and to drive social change and environmental change. So if I had to imagine someone who's typical, it probably would be someone who's restless about something in the world, something in their immediate environment that bothers them, and they can pretty much find a way to articulate it, sometimes clearly, sometimes in rage, sometimes in frustration, and sometimes with a great deal of enthusiasm because they've imagined a solution. It generally starts with someone who's passionate about something that bothers them or something they've seen, and that's important. They almost struggle to put the cork back on the bottle because they're bothered or inspired, right? And when we see that and that restlessness, there's a sense that whether this person happens to be 14 years old or 34 years old, that they want to do something about it. And it's them wanting to do something about it that we look for some evidence of action or a willingness to act. And then to simply take that action and to begin to channel it or simply partner with them as they act. And then to look for how we can guide and support. Don't get in the way of an entrepreneur. What you might do is clear the way a little bit, stand next to them, to provide some support, and every now and again, put some capital into their hands so they can buy that laptop or go to that meeting or take that prototype to the next level, or simply go on a course at a good business school to understand finance. So those are some of the elements. What happens from that point on is unique to each entrepreneur and enterprise.
But so Pat, I really for me, please. And I really like the idea that you've got a 3-stage program here, where you start off with identifying the social entrepreneur, providing them the initial training, sometimes at school level, then moving on to sort of helping them starting to build their business, and then or social enterprise, and then the 3rd stage is when that business wants to scale, and they've got a good business plan and so on, then to put some investment funding with that. And because that's really the journey, and typically people would be passed from organization to organization in South Africa to complete that journey, with a lot being lost in the gaps. And what you're doing is you're bridging that whole journey so they can have one relationship with you over a much longer period of time and be supported at each stage in that relationship.
Yeah, you've described it well. Although, one point of clarity, we don't have part 3 yet. We're going on a learning journey and asking a whole range of people to help us build that. I've just got permission from my board this year to explore it. We've got a little bit of capital to get it going, but it's not necessarily confirmed that come next year that we will implement that unless everyone is convinced it's the right move to make. I think so, but you know, the bigger you get, the less flexible the entrepreneur is to simply go out and do it, which I think is right. The risks increase, but so too your network of really, really smart people grows for you to mitigate those risks. So that's the point of clarity. We've got 1 and 2. 3, we're exploring this year. But you're right, it is about trying to de-risk this. So if we have faith in our ideal entrepreneur who, let's say, we discovered at Siyabonga Secondary in Bromfisherville, has somehow come through, and we've now taken them through the classic unlimited model and funded them and supported them, and the enterprise grows. And if we get to that next stage of readying them for the market, we should probably be the entity that takes a stake or provides loan finance on terms and helps them earn respect for the bigger capital players. And then to stand back and stay with them, but pretty much indicate to the market we believe in our own, and they're worthy of the investment.
No, I've definitely, sorry, you can mute again. And I've seen that model work elsewhere in the world quite well. I mean, most recently, looking at the whole social enterprise industry in the UK, and where actually Unlimited's based, and seeing that sometimes just by putting a bit of money in a social entrepreneur and demonstrating faith in them, it acts as a signal to the market, who then watch for a year or two, and if it seems to be working, then they jump in very quickly, because they are slightly more risk averse, a lot of normal impact investors. And so I'd just like to, now that we're talking about investment, I want to talk about the IDC. So for people who are not familiar, the IDC is the Industrial Development Corporation, and it's got a social enterprise fund that invests in South African social enterprises, regardless of their legal form. But they must obviously meet the criteria of a social enterprise. And they're largely funded by the IDC and the Flemish, who seem to be quite a big mover and shaker in the social enterprise economy in South Africa at the moment. And so we've heard stories like Josh Cox, who we had on last year, with Trademark got R2.5 million grant or investment from the IDC. And in your case, you've got 32 million investment, which is substantially greater. And we all thought 2.5 million was a lot to invest in a social enterprise. And so how did you go about getting that investment, or what sparked the idea? So let's start there rather. What sparked the idea in the very beginning that this was a possibility, that it was possible to approach the IDC and get investment, and that there was a chance of making it work? So Pat.
What sparked the idea initially was conversations with my board, who were connected and had ears to the ground and eyes on different horizons, who pretty much said a while ago that there was this fund available at the IDC. I actually knew nothing about it. My head's down working with partners, because remember, up until now we've traded, and 85% of our income is invoiced. Very little of it is grant-based. And up until that point, we simply looked to talk to customers we could trade with. And I say that with respect to those institutions who are donor influenced to a large extent, and sometimes donor dependent, because that too can be considered a sale. You've got to convince someone to get that grant into your organization and then satisfy the customer. But I'm speaking about going through the companies and invoicing for services. And when we talk to our auditors, Deloitte, they often have the conversation with us, but is this donor funds or is it really generated income? We've prided ourselves on the fact that we need to trade for change. So I didn't look to IDC. We still don't have a fundraising department, Marcus. We never have had that. And when a few board members started saying, hang on a second, let's go through, the IDC's got a conference. In fact, that's the first time I met you. There was a conference happening at the IDC, I think it was last year. Not last year, sorry, the year before. There was a conference
2012 or 13, yeah.
Somewhere there, and then you spoke on a panel. The first time I said hello to you, actually. And what I then learned at that was a hell of a lot. I learned about the fact that the IDC's got this division that focuses on social enterprises. I discovered that the Flemish were keen on investing in this space. I met so many people I hadn't met before in that room, and many that I had known for a long time, like Shona and so many people who've been pioneers in the space. So, short answer, what sparked it was everybody else. And then what evolved naturally, I think, was a conversation around a merger between Unlimited and Life College. And I was serving as a trustee at Unlimited long before the merger. And what then happened was a conversation of the two coming together. It was Kathy Waters and Rich Benton, based in the UK, and Heather Brandon, who spoke about a study tour that happened in London. A lot of people here got together, and you were also part of that in terms of understanding what was going on abroad. So I came to it quite late. I simply listened, asked lots of questions, and then got told, go in and see if we can make a case to the IDC And based on the fact that we now merge, we may have the reach, we may have the institutional strength, we have the governance in place, and we now have the models with the merged entity to speak to the IDC in a meaningful way. And so we did. And good news, you know, we managed to secure an understanding with it.
Okay, and Pat? So if you just mute.
Yeah, doing it now.
Perfect. Okay, just muting to prevent that echo from happening. That's why I'm not interrupting as much as I normally do. Otherwise, we're going to have a lot of feedback. And so, yeah, I remember that study tour very well, and that was mid-2013. And then when we met, I think it was November or December 2013, when I was about the panel about the whole social enterprise field in South Africa. And I'm curious, so you got this 32 million, and so I have two questions about that. The first is, what form does that 32 million take? Like, is it loans? Is it grants? Is it loans that get converted to grants on achievement of certain social outcomes? So what does that look? And then the second question is, you talk about how you used 7 million to unlock the 32 million. So that implies that the 7 million was like a key that you turned and the other money arrived. So how did that work for you? So, okay, those are my two questions.
Okay. I'll address the second one first. And just a point of correction, we put together a 32 million rand development plan.
Okay.
We got guidance from Stuart Bartlett and Judy at the IDC, who are people who are passionate about the space, and Stephen at the time. And what we then did was worked with them to develop what would be what has now become an accepted proposal. And that was my request from the very beginning to Stuart, to say to him, I don't want preferential treatment, but I also don't want to be writing reams and reams of paper proposals and mailing them off to you and shooting in the dark. We're both busy people. What we need to do is find a way of together crafting what would be a proposal that would benefit this country and put the social purpose above what would be a pitching process. And he agreed, although there's some aspects, of course, that he could not declare to me because he takes his proposals to another committee, and I respect that.
Yes.
Put my team around the table with him, got a briefing, and then we got to work. And he made us work for a number of months. It was hard work, but we finally managed to shape sort of one part of this proposal, put it in front of them again, and they gave us some more guidance around that. But right at the outset, we said we'd like to put up 20% of this 32 million rand development proposal, and we'd like to get the IDC to put up 80%. Now, the full amount's 32, we put up the 6 or 7, and the IDC put up the 25, the balance. So as just a point of correction, 32 is the total amount, and we've provided 20% of that. Now, what the IDC then did was clarify their requirements. It had to be in 3 provinces that the Flemish are very clear about, and the IDC is clear about, being KZN, Eastern Cape, and the Free State. And because we're a national organization, that fitted in easily. Our board wants impact across the country. There was no argument with that. What we then did was indicate a range of deliverables. And those deliverables and impacts are really what the IDC is buying.
Okay.
And there are specific deliverables within specific time frames, specific outcomes, quality measures, and a specific model that they've purchased, including the merged entities offerings right now. And based on that, we signed, agreed, and we started implementation this year.
Okay. Sorry, Pat. So to get this right, it's not a loan that you've been given, and the way I understand it is more that they are paying you to achieve certain social outcomes. And if you could please clarify.
Yeah, that's exactly it. If we don't deliver on those impacts, there'll be implications for us. And I like that accountability. And what we are meant to do is declare all of the expenditure, we had to do a very detailed 5-year cash flow to show that long after the IDC funding has come to an end, which is 3 years. Did I say that? Sorry. It's a 3-year deal to spend this amount of money over 3 years, including our spend, and thereafter show that we can sustainably continue these offices in those regions by selling our classic programs and products. So the IDC gets development, and they get the impact long after the 3-year starter investment, but it definitely is about the impact and not alone.
And Pat, so in a sense, the IDC is acting as a bridging customer. So they're acting as a customer of that's purchasing your social impact in these 3 provinces, and doing so in a way knowing that if they act as a customer over this 3-year period, then they would have grown your business substantially, that you can continue growing without them, and that the social impact will continue. Am I correct in assuming that?
Absolutely correct.
Okay, and that's definitely, I mean, that taps into a far broader trend, just thinking about it, where it's starting to look at donors' investments and investors as customers. You know, that even if they might be giving a grant to a social enterprise, that grant is actually paying for something to be delivered, for an outcome to be achieved on behalf of a group of beneficiaries. And that the moment one starts thinking about an investor or a donor or a CSI department being a customer, and you know, I believe that it fundamentally changes the way people approach it, rather than this view that it's their moral duty to simply give. And with a lot of nonprofit organizations, are now getting very frustrated if people don't give them money. And so what you've done is, firstly, the IDC is very progressive in its approach, and secondly, your thinking was very modern. And I mean, perhaps you could share your thoughts on this.
I think your observations are astute, and there is a global trend to find ways of purchasing impact. Of course, if you talk to Franco Bonici at the Bertha Center at GSB, he'll tell you that trying to measure impact is a tough thing, and trying to put these tools in place is something we haven't solved yet. But the world is certainly looking to finding ways of purchasing impact and measuring that in a way that's meaningful. Now, luckily for us, our impacts were accepted by an IDC and the committee that Stuart and his team put it forward to. It's fairly simple. So many entrepreneurs to be found, so many entrepreneurs to be funded and supported over so many years, and then to also show those impacts of those entrepreneurs right back to our ecosystem. Sounds fairly simple, but the job, of course, is tougher than that. There's nothing easy in this space. But you're right. That trend is. I'll just pause there. Sorry, you've got a question. Let me mute this.
Just to observe that, in Franco's case, the Bertha Center at the University of Cape Town is very active around the idea of social impact bonds, which is an investor essentially carrying the risk and paying a social enterprise to deliver a social service. And you know, so that's the one side of things. The other question I had is around impact, where you're talking about outputs and outcomes. So in a sense, your output metrics are those, how many social entrepreneurs you put through your business and through your programs and which provinces you work in. Outcome metrics are more around the turnover of those businesses and the customers served by the businesses that you're investing in. So what is the balance of those? I mean, from the IDC's perspective, which ones are they most interested in?
Well, at this stage, the IDC was fairly generous with us at the beginning, simply saying, in the first year, you're going to go into these provinces and start. And we've asked from the beginning that we see it as a partnership with them. And we will learn as we go. And I think that's an important stance to take. I cannot, in good conscience, promise an impact in the Eastern Cape around entrepreneurs that I've yet to find. What I can do is go out, have a look, see what the market has, and support those who exist, and many of them may exist within other support ecosystems. Perhaps find a few new ones, and when we have them and we've awarded the first round of 15, we'll then be able to detail what the measurements might. Now, turnover does matter. In South Africa, job creation In South Africa, the extent to which we are dealing with that particular environment's social and environmental problems is important. When we find our 15 around each of those entrepreneurs, we will detail their impacts, bring it back to the IDC and our board, and then ultimately look to report on what have been declared impacts and see how well they're doing against those. And that's the same with KZN and Free State and the rest of the work that we do around the country. Remember, I'm just speaking about those 3 provinces now because of IDC, but we do work right around the country, and the same principles apply.
Okay, so I mean, there's 2 lessons, Pat, that I'm really getting from this discussion. The one is from the social enterprises side, and realizing that to see investors and donors as customers, and to put together something that provides a lot of value to them, as opposed to simply asking for money or begging for money. And on the second hand, is the lesson that the IDC holds for other donors. It's rather than simply having a portfolio of funds and giving donations left, right, and center, to rather look at very particular social outcomes that need to be achieved. So, for example, the IDC is very big about job creation in certain areas, and then paying very carefully for those social outcomes to be achieved. Because that also, if you're paying for results in that way, it adds a massive incentive for that organization to get really creative about how it approaches it. And whereas if you're simply funding, what happens is people just make their activities more efficient. It doesn't promote the same type of thinking. So there's a lesson here for both the social enterprises themselves, and secondly for other donors and corporate social investment departments who are wondering why they're having no impact. So perhaps they should call Stuart and pay a bit more attention there to how the IDC is doing things. And okay, so I've got one more question then before we open up to a wider audience. And it's, what advice would you have for someone in your situation trying to get some sort of impact investment?
I always, when asked this question, preface what I'm saying with this, that advice is cheap. And it's not just a cliche, I mean it. Because if anything, we have failed our way to success. And if you can describe what we have now as some success, we chart that through so many failures because they've taught us our greatest lessons. And one of them has been trying to trade for change and deciding right at the outset that we were not going to be donor funded and have a fundraising department. And the successes that came from that obviously was a great team motivated. We were going to do business, business principles for social change, right? But Marcus, that is tough. It really has been tough. And the number of failures to find ways to do that are too many, and we don't have time to go through them right now. So if there's any advice that I give, it's on that backdrop. But there might be something in the fact that we constantly have had a client focus from the beginning. When we were in the garage, and we went door to door to knock in the evenings, to knock on doors, to talk to parents, to convince them to enroll their children with us. We couldn't partner with a school then. We had to do it all ourselves. There was, someone said at the time, you're like Tupperware salesmen. You knock on the door, make the appointment, and you look evangelical almost with a little file under your hand, and you sit down, and luckily if you get a cup of tea and convince them that they need to do this in addition to school. And every single one of those was very useful, but what it did do, it trained us from the outset to be customer focused, to be client centered, and that has been significant versus a holier than thou, I'm doing good work, you should give me to this, you've got capital. It just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. We've got to earn every single cent and every minute that we get. That's helped us a great deal. And if that's of any use, then good.
And Pat, so I have one more comment before I hand over to Christoph. Certainly I couldn't agree with you more. And in the last 20 years that I've been involved in the sector, I've seen a definite shift by the organizations and social enterprises that are really successful in this space. And they see customers when they look around. And whereas, during the 1990s in the nonprofit space, it was the strong sense of entitlement that because organizations were doing good, people owed them money. And this theme is covered quite strongly in that ebook of mine called Think Like a Social Enterprise. So just listening to the way you talk about LifeCo UnLtd and what you do, you get 10 out of 10 in terms of the principles there. But I'd just like to hand over to Christoph now, and it looks like he has a question there. Christoph?
Yeah, it took a moment there to unmute. We've successfully imported someone into this conversation today, but then he realized that he didn't have a mic or camera. So, Peter, next time, let's prepare that before. But now we know it works, that we can actually, if someone raises an interesting question, we can in fact get someone to actually ask that question in person. So Peter had an interesting comment in terms of leveraging from his existing business in reaching out to schools and the work that they want to do around entrepreneurship through schools. So I suppose the question, if I read it right, well, I can read what he says. He says this is great stuff, it's good stuff, and it's entirely up his alley. He's got many questions, by the way, Pat, that he believes that he could, if posed to you or people in your organization, could help him greatly. So maybe that there's a question in there, you know, sort of to what degree can people that are looking to do similar stuff that you've done access the knowledge that you've gained. But then he goes on to say that he wants to leverage from his existing business. So I think that is quite an interesting proposition, you know, sort of that people that have fairly successful, call them commercially orientated businesses that are trading and offering good services out there, but they definitely didn't start it with a social impact as the main purpose of that business, and they want to add something to what they do. What would you say, Pat, would be a good way to leverage off a fairly well-established, fairly successful business into social impact activities?
Well, not to be a wet blanket, but I firmly believe that the difference between a social enterprise and a classic private enterprise is mission. I actually don't give a damn how they're registered. They could be private, they could be trusts, they could be NPOs. I actually don't care. If the mission of that organization is social or environmental to a greater degree, the chances are it will be considered a social enterprise. So to come to your question, Christo, if the enterprise sorry, what's the listener's name or the viewer's name?
It's Peter Latergan.
Peter. If Peter's business is effectively structured as a private enterprise, and what he's wanting to do is to create some social good as well, it is then a corporate responsibility program. It is a good corporate citizen program. And if that's what it is, a lot of good can be done. There's a lot of good that's been done in the world with companies that have gone and taken their 1% or even more sometimes and impacted society very positively. And that's all it will be. However, if Peter's looking at the fact that his mission in terms of his core business is significantly shifted towards social and environmental impacts, and the chances are he's more social enterprise. I don't know the business specifically, so I can't give you more advice than that. But I think it's about asking himself and his team about, is it mission-centered or not? Or is it simply a corporate social investment program?
Okay. So you might comment on that. And so I've been approached. Sorry, Pat. Sorry. Okay. I've been approached by a number of businesses who want to become a social enterprise, and you're perfectly correct that about being intention and about how they use their profits ultimately. And what's so fascinating for me is, and most of them think that to get involved in social issues, they have to become a non-profit organization. So a lot of the conversation is all around how do they establish a non-profit arm or a non-profit wing. And what's so clear to me just through these discussions is that there are so many opportunities that are available to businesses to get involved in this field, and without needing to rely on donations or CSI departments. And there's just a shortage of awareness about what these opportunities are. But I touched on it a bit in the ebook that's on my website called How to Apply and how one's business can become a social enterprise. But just to emphasize that there's as much opportunity and flexibility for a for-profit social enterprise, one with a for-profit model, and to get involved in social issues as there is someone with a non-profit model. And there are just as many, if not more, funds available for it. And so a lot of people think that the legal form of their social enterprise is this big limiting factor, and they need to go off and create some sort of hybrid model. And I'm just saying it isn't. There's a lot more opportunity out there. I mean, if you look at groups like CFULA in the online education space and GreenPop in the whole green field, who we will be having the show in about 2 months' time, both of them are doing extremely well, and from the perspective of being a business with a social purpose. Okay, Christoph?
Yes, I think part of Peter's question was also to what degree the lessons learned. So, I mean, if LifeCo had to go through the hurt of making some mistakes and then correcting those mistakes are perhaps some things that other people would repeat if they didn't know about it. So, Pat, with your move to work closer and that in fact then eventually merged with Unlimited, is there scope for people like Peter to access the expertise and knowledge that you've gained over time as a social enterprise, assuming that what he's planning and what he's thinking of will fit the mold of that? And also, in fact, he's quite diligently looking up what he can find of your work online, and says that he's battling to find more information. Maybe you can just talk a bit about, sort of if people that are watching now, or also know, by the way, we find that about 4 or 5 times more people come afterwards watch the show on YouTube later on. So also those that are watching later on may want to know where they can go to find out more about what you do and the kind of support that they possibly can get from you.
Christo, yeah, the short answer is there have been many failures, and I enjoy talking about the failures more than the success. I really do. Because I think failures bind all of us, and after a while, a success story is actually, to be frank, pretty boring, because it's all balloons and hooray at the end, I mean, how you got there and how you stumbled probably humanizes the organization more and gives us more to learn from. So what I'd like to do is this year, there'll be opportunities to speak about our learning experience and how we have failed our way to some kind of success. And I'll simply invite, I'll send you guys the invitation as well, so you can send it out to the database. We'll send it out to our database and the various business schools that we partnered with in our institutions. And there'll be a chance to speak this through. And not just to speak about this, but also I'm going to do some business at the end of it and extend an invitation to everyone in South Africa to apply for the LifeCo UnLtd award. And there may well be entrepreneurs out there who we will award and fund and support. And they're at different levels. Some are community-based, some are larger, some are ready to go to scale. And I'll be doing those talks, and on the back end of that, no free lunch. I want people to see if they can actually do business with us. Oh, sorry, I forgot to mention, in terms of getting hold of us, there's a website you can get. I actually think our website sucks. It's so bad. And just now, in this financial year, we've got some money put aside to reinvigorate it. But for now, you can still go there and get some information. And it's simply www.lcu-sa.com. lcu-sa.com.
Great stuff. So if you can just mute Pat. In your discussion earlier, I found one comment very interesting, and that was that you just started off trading, and that above 85% of your income comes from just trading, which is kind of the opposite of what many, especially NPOs that are looking at shifting into the social enterprise space more prominently. It's kind of the opposite trajectory, the opposite story, where they're looking for what can they add to their arsenal so they can actually trade. So I'm not sure from that experience, but of having a trade focus, that you found that there are certain ways in marrying your purpose, your bigger intentions that you have with the organization, the social impact that you want to achieve, and the actual activity of exchanging value through financial transactions. And perhaps you want to talk about the failures, the mistakes. So what mistakes did you make in that space that we can learn from?
Okay, I'll speak about one, given the time that we have. When we set out to bring about the change, and a simple way to describe the change we want is to shift mindset and shift results for the individual, for the entrepreneur, for the leader, for the company, etc. And we rooted all of our work in consciousness. Very difficult to sell a consciousness shift. You do much better selling a bottle of water than you would do trying to tell someone to pay you to shift their thinking for their results. But hey, the systemic change that we want to see as a group of teachers, and today we're not just teachers, of course, I'm talking about the early days. The systemic change that we wanted was, if you did not shift the thinking, if you did not shift consciousness, we would be stuck as a nation and not enjoy the results and the freedom that was promised. So that's hard to sell, but that's a systemic change we wanted. We had to find ways of packaging that into specific programs. People liked the idea, but they bought a program called Identity. Who am I? They liked the idea, and they bought a program called Young Entrepreneurs, knowing that if you shift the thinking young enough, they may be entrepreneurial. They liked a program called New Young Leaders, and we rooted it in leadership is a state of mind, entrepreneurship is a state of mind, etc., and so on. Packaging that was a big challenge. And once we had that package, and it wasn't packaged perfectly, it's not even packaged perfectly now. It'll keep being developed. But people started buying those products based on specific hard copy manuals, books. So we took what people knew. They bought a program written up as a pack and a book and a DVD and a process. We took what they knew and gave them what they didn't know. And the results at the end of that, the impact is what they enjoyed. And so we asked them to refer 5 more customers and so on and so forth. That was really, really hard. But we did sell.
If I can interrupt you, the fact that you had a DVD, that you had some physical products that you were selling, did that help you to actually trade?
Absolutely. We were selling something that we know society needed, and a child needed, and a parent needed. But they simply couldn't buy it by me or any one of my staff telling them this. We realized that quickly because we were these philosophers standing at people's doorsteps trying to tell them mindset has got to shift before you realize full potential. And they went, yes, 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 but what the hell am I buying? And when we went and actually packaged it and gave them the familiar pack, DVD, and working with life champions who spoke about how thinking is what underpinned great entrepreneurs and great leaders and academic performance, then they were able to purchase something. We could give them a pack. I could also manage my stock. If I produced 5,000 of these, I actually could do stock control and actually know that 5,000 of them went into the market, and I could actually show an inventory list and income. But we knew we were selling something that was a little more difficult to package. So it was vital, that was vital, to take what was in the ether and turn it into product and ultimately arrive at an ether impact.
Okay. And so I like the way you talk about products and packaging products, because, and I noticed a lot of organizations do very great things, but it's not packaged. It's not a single unit with its own brand, its process, its results that can be easily measured. So and a lot of what I'm seeing in successful organizations is they're taking whatever combination of goods and services. In this case, it was your training programs, and the good was the training material and the DVD, and packaging it in a way that also enables a profit margin. And I'm sure you had a profit margin, or your business wouldn't have been growing. Am I correct with that, Pat?
Yeah, we remember our philosophy has always been that we would trade for change. So from the very outset, we would cost things in minute detail and look at any kinds of economies of scale and sit carefully with the person producing the book, negotiate really hard with the publisher and buy on volume and negotiate 90-day terms, but we would see the cash 30 days before we ran the program. All the classic principles of money in first and pay as late as possible. That sounds terrible in our market, but that's exactly how it works. And then trying to get the benefits of economies of scale, and then to find ways where we could actually price it at what we thought the market was prepared to pay. And did we make mistakes? Of course. We priced too high in some cases, too low in others, but finally the market tells you what it's prepared to pay. And if that price point is right, we'll keep running the program. If it ran at a loss, we'd reconsider and find another way. All the classic business principles applied, and the costing was vital to the development of that impact event.
Well, that's quite a strong point, perhaps, Marcus. If we can work towards winding down the show today, we're already past half the hour. So
it's just very exciting.
Yeah, that's quite a strong message in there. You know, sort of that if you can find ways to package a product that you can go out to market and offer for price, and be very mindful in terms of how you price it, so that there is in fact a margin for you in there. You'll never subsidize it. It will, when it starts work, it will work for you. And if it doesn't work, then you need to rework what you do. It's either your price is wrong, or your product is wrong, or you offering it to the wrong people. So there's a real strong message, and it's also in the consulting work that we do with entrepreneurs, whether social entrepreneurs or not, is of course a message. It's just a basic business principle. So I would love to keep talking about the problems, because it's in those problems that I'm sure also that we're going to find a lot of gems. And maybe, Pat, we should bring you back sometime soon, because you know we can maybe identify the 7 biggest problems that you can learn from in social entrepreneurship or something like that.
Yeah, that would be a good one.
But Marcus, but do you have something to wrap the show up for us today?
I've got one more thought, and so we talk about LifeCo UnLtd's products and everything, and the careful packaging and costing of those products. But for LifeCo UnLtd to grow in the way it did and serve as many people as it did, it must have provided exceptional value for money. You know, that when its customers were buying that product that was presented in front of them for the price that they could buy it at, they thought that they were getting a good deal. And that's why that business grew. So that would be my closing thought.
Marcus, just to say yes and no to that, there's some customers of ours who are heavily subsidized, and our model you would have worked out in the hybrid is we sell to those who can afford, and we're happy to do certain market rates. We subsidize heavily those individuals in our network who can't afford. But everyone does contribute sometimes just R2.50 an hour when the real cost is 250. But we will charge the 250 when we can. But the answer is yes and no, and perhaps at another time we can unpack why yes and no.
Another time. We need a part 2 of this conversation.
Yeah. So we also know that we can go visit when you advertise your roadshow, to hear possibly some of these wisdoms and what you've learned. But thank you very much. This was really a powerful session for us today. Really, I think contributing not only the inspirational part of making the difference through the change of the way that people think, but also bringing it practical to how you make it work in organizational context. So, and of course, that's where the challenge lies for all of us as social entrepreneurs, is not only to be inspired by the difference we want to make, but to find that sweet spot where we can add value and do it in a sustainable way. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Christo, Jaco, and Marcus. Thank you for the work that you do in this space. I'm a great admirer of what you do, and I wish you every success. And I've just been told by one of my colleagues that our website currently is being worked on by our tech team. So, check again in maybe tomorrow or the day after, and it should be up. But thank you, guys. I appreciate what you do for the space.
Yes, we will post on the Talking Social Enterprise Facebook page the details of where you can find more about Pat and LifeCo UnLtd. You might have noticed that Jaco didn't appear again. In fact, he was active in the chat, so I assume that his internet wasn't really cooperative tonight. But if we can ask Jaco also to post those news and events that he were going to share on the show tonight for us on the Facebook page, then we know people can get all of that. So with that, Marcus, do you want to say bye-bye? That's bye-bye from me.
Goodbye from me, and thanks, Pat. It's been a real pleasure chatting on the show. And yeah, next time when you're in town, let's grab coffee in real time.
Great. Good night.